Welcome, everyone, to the Employer Content Show, part of the Talent Insight series brought to you by Hire Well and Before You Apply. I'm your host, James Hornick. Joining me is my co-host from Before You Apply, Nate. No, I didn't change companies for a week. You're making that up, Guggia. Inside joke, which you can get into if you feel like it or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and our very special guest for the second time, good friend of ours from Copywriting for Recruiters, Mitch Sullivan.
Hi, guys. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man.
What time is
Good
it
to
there,
see
Mitch? What time is it in the UK right now?
Time is 5 o'clock. Just gone.
All right, so happy hour. You're passing on happy hour to talk to us.
And that can be expressed in so many different ways. Yeah.
Sure can.
All right, before we start, check out all the episodes of the Employer Content Show on Hire Well Talent Insights. That's talentinsights.hirewell.com. Today's segment: why are companies so bad at selling themselves? So obviously we're making an implication there without even defining it. So, and I guess
I can define it if you want.
Yeah, why don't you please go for it? Mitch Sullivan, what we're talking about here?
What we're talking about is a company selling itself as a viable place to work to the types of people it wants to come and work for them. Now where it can get a little bit fuzzy is that, people are a little bit, can be quite variable about what selling is or how you're going to define selling. And some people think, selling in recruitment, it shouldn't really go. There's too much of a juxtaposition because you can't really close someone into taking a job, which I agree with. You can't. It's too big a decision. People have to make that decision themselves. But you can position a job in such a way that it starts to answer the question as to why somebody might consider doing that job or working for that company, or why they might start to think that that job or that company might make their life more rewarding in some way. And that's what branding, advertising, marketing has to do. Recruitment, branding, marketing, and advertising has to do. That's how I see it. Really.
I've always thought of things, even kind of taking a step back from the recruitment process specifically, because I work in a sales function. I'm always like researching companies, trying to see what they're about, and it's always shocked me how your average B2B firm or software companies and tech firms, like you just go to their websites, it's all the same. Like I feel like I never, like the amount of times I can go into a call with a new client and know exactly what their business is without like just by kind of checking out what they have online, it's pretty rare because there's always like some levels of nuances that just aren't really expressed well.
Yeah. And
so part of me always wonders, do companies have a hard time selling themselves on what places to work because they have a hard time selling themselves on what they do in general? And it's I don't want to get away from the kind of the point, but I guess it is kind of related though. So, but if you look at, and it gets even worse when you get more granular and look at their careers page, and most companies' careers page is just a list of jobs, and getting more specific on, and I don't want to turn this into another like job ads and job descriptions that ran from Mitch, but the old joke is, and here's where I think everyone can meet on common ground, is like most job descriptions, which people post on their websites, are just copies of copies, like that's like the most common thing. And of course, you're going to have a hard time selling anybody on anything if you're not creating anything. You have to, that's how it's done. Job descriptions are typically copies of copies versus like the level of granularity you could get by truly selling yourself and like what your unique value proposition is and how far talent acquisition teams, and we can talk about that, are away from one versus the other. So,
career sites, a lot of career sites I see, I think are reasonably good, actually. Okay. And the reason I think that is because they're kind of broken down, so they're easy to find. It's easy to identify. To see what you're going to get per click, and it tends to attempt to answer most of the questions. And I tend to think that if somebody's on a careers page, then it's quite possible that they're already halfway towards making the decision that they want to work for that company or that agency because they're there. But most of the heavy lifting is done on an external site somewhere that gets them to go there. So, and that's, I think, what we're talking about here today. Because once somebody lands on the page you want them to land on, then they're in buying territory, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Then it's a numbers game. But getting them there is the art, I think. Nate, what do you reckon?
I'm writing down a bunch of stuff. Okay. This is like in the simplest way. I think about the conversation in sales and marketing about how to attract buyers is happening like all the time. It's like broken down to like a science in a way. Like there's people who like dedicate their careers to figuring out like James, before we jumped on, I mean, like we were even talking about like pricing and like all this kind of stuff, but it's just like there's people who are just focused solely on like how to connect a buyer with their product. And then which is the same thing we're talking about, just applied to a different type of buyer and a different type of product. We're talking about candidates and jobs. And it seems like there isn't that level of conversation happening on our side. So we go like, okay, what does the candidate care about? And how do we get that to them? And if we look at it like in like those simplest of terms, then the whole thing starts to become demystified. And we go, okay, like where do those candidates live? Online, offline, wherever. And what are the things they care about? And how do we like draw the straightest line between the two to get it to them? To then start getting them in a position of buying, Mitch, like you're talking about, where they can then be on like company properties and starting to like dig deeper and things like that. But I think like companies don't look at it that way. What they'll do is they want to jump straight to like, what are industry norms? So like they might start designing things and spending a bunch of money in different areas because that's like what all their competitors are doing, or that's like what best practices are, instead of just looking at it like, okay, where are candidates at? What information do they care about to even know who we are and to start a conversation? How do we get it to them in the fastest possible way? I think marketing and sales does a really good job of that. I think recruiting and employer brand does a poor job of that.
So why? Why do companies seem to not care that much about how their various employment propositions come across?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of care. For some, it definitely is. I think it's a lack of skill.
Right. So you think it's ignorance rather than arrogance?
I do. And but I think there's a lot of like, there are people in positions who are saddled with trying to figure this out, who don't have a lot of time to figure it out because they're usually also running a talent team, or maybe they're like part of that talent team. They want to figure it out, but they just don't have like the resources or the skill to do it. And they're like open about saying it, but they just like don't have any other options. Like go ahead, James. Yeah.
I was going to say too, I think a lot of it's kind of like how businesses are structured. Like one of the million takes I read this week was talking about how, companies of a certain size, like your CEO is really a salesperson, right? If you're still under $1 million in revenue, like that's your main job. It's not really running the company, it's getting sales done. And I do think if you look at it also too, like the most common progression path to getting to a CEO it usually goes to like the CRO, if not maybe this CFO or whatever, depending on the type of company. But like, very uncommon path is like the head of HR, the head of talent acquisition, becoming like the CEO. You know what I mean? So I think that you're talking about how salespeople, like sales and marketing, have it down to a science because it's a revenue generating function. That's the whole impetus of the company. That's what is going to have the executives' attention first. And that's why they get all the toys. That's why they have all this kind of like, soft science and everything else put into it. Whereas I just don't think there's the awareness around talent acquisition, that it's that hard, that it's that tricky, that it needs that much of a priority for it to get the type of priority the companies need to be good at selling themselves for job seekers.
Mm.
So you don't think to take your analogy of a lot of CEOs, particularly for high growth or ambitious startups, smaller tech companies, are essentially salespeople, and they pretty much have to be. Which I accept. Is that kind of what you're saying, that a lot of them have a strong sales mentality? Or
yeah.
Okay.
I do think so. And I guess I want to hedge this too, because I do think there are a lot of good small tech CEOs that are good at getting involved in the hiring process. I just don't think as many. You know what I mean? So
but why then? Why are they unable to translate that sales awareness to how they recruit at the front end of how they recruit? Because we're only talking about the front end, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's a matter of, I think it's just a matter, I'm talking about their time personally, you know what I mean? Like if they're getting involved in something at the organization, like they're going to veer towards the sales side versus the talent acquisition side in general. I'm making a generalization. I don't have data to back this up, but I just kind of looking at it. And then, so therefore, how do you get the talent acquisition side of it done? Is you have someone else do it, right? You get someone else to kind of take that charge and kind of be in charge of it. And I think whoever that is going to have less leeway than the CEO or the whoever it is to do something creative or do something more interesting or dictate the same. You know, they're not going to have the same level of they're not going to be able to tell the same vision story. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's just, there's a lot of things that it just won't be as good no matter who it is. It's kind of leading it typically.
Nate, go on. You were going to say something.
yeah. I don't know if it's related to this right now, though.
Okay.
There is something though that I've been thinking about recently, which, but we can. I have it written down. We'll come back to it.
Okay. It's look, guys. It's a big sell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the 4 or 5 most stressful things anyone's ever going to do in their life, which is move from one job to another. It's right up there with marriage, divorce, public speaking, and dying, I think, and buying a house. So it's probably sick.
Okay, so maybe this does apply then. So, okay, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was thinking about big purchases that we make as consumers. One of them being a job. Maybe it's the biggest. Job, car, home, things like that. When we move into a position of like of the buying cycle, whether that's like just at the very beginning with like thinking about it, wanting to like do a little discovery to like seriously thinking about it, there's 2 things that we care about. Inventory, we want to know what's available, and information. So there's, in the world of job seeking, inventory is easy, right? It's easy to find what's available. That's how job boards make their money, right? Mm-hmm. So inventory is accessible. Information is also accessible, but one of the things that I hammer probably too much is just like, it's the wrong information that's available. It's just like, there's sites like, let's say Built In or the Muse or like whatever that exists to give candidates, job seekers information. But I argue that it's just like information that is just like at best sort of relevant, but it's not the actual information. It's not the information that you guys would want if you were looking at Zillow to find out like what's available in your neighborhood or going to like shop cars and stuff like that. It's like, it's different. And I'm like, what? Like, we need more of that. We need more of like inventory paired with like hyper relevant information up front to then make this like buying experience for candidates a lot more like the stuff that we want from the apps that we use like on a daily basis in our personal lives.
Okay.
And I guess you could say kind of tangentially adding on to that. So, I mean, it's that there isn't a good ecosystem for that to exist. You know what I mean? It's not like if you're running TA or you're leading a small company that like there's a platform out there that makes whatever that information you decide is, makes it easy. So when you're using the readily available tools out there that everyone else is using and they're kind of bland and not that interesting, then you know what I mean? In order to go above and beyond, you're asking, people have to think outside the box, which is harder to do than we realize, you know what I mean, to truly stand out. So I think I agree with what you're saying, and it still comes down to kind of priorities, and.
But the question I have for you guys though is like, why on the recruiting side of it, why does the industry think that information for some reason needs to be different? Like, what I'm saying is like, why does employer brand, or I'm just going to group it all into like one. We're going to call it talent, right? Why does the talent industry think that the information that candidates want at the beginning is like fluffy culture bullshit, or like stuff that like doesn't get to the heart of it? But like as consumers, we just want like hardcore information that allows us to like start parsing out opportunities or parsing out the inventory. Like it's just a completely different mindset. I just don't know like why there's this disconnect between the two.
I think there are basically two types of candidate, actually.
Okay.
Two types of future employee. There's the potential future employee who needs another job, and there's the potential future employee who doesn't need another job, but is probably starting to get a little bit jaded in the job that they are doing. So they'll occasionally look, or they'll allow their heads to be turned if they bump into something that might look interesting on social media or anywhere else. Yeah. So yeah. And those two people will want to see different things and will read job information or employment or recruitment or talent information differently. Yeah. It's only when that person who doesn't need another job gets to a point where they want that job that they'll start to want to know the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of, you know, what's involved, i.e. a job description or a job specification.
Cool.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Or a casual 15-minute chat with the hiring manager just to scope it out. Yeah.
Right.
But I honestly, I've worked in house, so I've kind of walked the same carpet as some of these people for about 4 years, and quite a number of dots got joined up in my head during that period. And I came away with the belief that not all, but a lot of hiring managers think they're doing the world a favor by having vacancies. You know, and HR is, well, you know, they'll read the job posting if they want to work for us. And yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know whether it's people drinking too much Kool-Aid or they just forget what it was like when they were looking. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. So that was one thing I wanted to come back to, because we're talking about like selling it on multiple levels. So there's the level of the actual recruiters who are talking to people, but then there's like the branding communications aspect. But I mean, the difference between a good recruiter and a terrible recruiter is like objectively, who's just better at selling people on the thing they're working on. I think we can kind of agree with that, like substantially. That's what gets. But I think that when you take it up to like a corporate level, you know, I think that companies that are mostly good, there's companies that aren't good at messaging, but they have good recruiters who are able to kind of make that personal one-on-one message.
Yeah.
But what I wonder is there's that another next level jump of being able to kind of like do what the recruiters are doing kind of at scale through messaging, which I don't think is done very well. So
my experience of messaging with recruiters, both those that I've worked with on coaching and having received them as a potential candidate, is that they send a message that's too long. For the most part, it's 300-400 words. It's the size of a job posting. And if it's being sent to someone that doesn't know you and they can easily see you're a recruiter, they're probably not going to read it. Why would they? Or they send an attachment, or the message is a cut and paste of that attachment, which is a job description, which is dull and boring and not a lot of fun to read. What I don't see happen very often is that first message containing only, say, 60, 70 words. Because when you open a message and look at it and it's only got 70, 60 words in that message, it's impossible to look at it without reading it.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it is. It's literally impossible. So if your first message says, "Hi, Nate, my name's Mitch. I'm working on an XYZ vacancy that I think you'll be interested in because," and then I list 1, 2, maybe 3 benefits that I think you'll be interested in based on your profile. And then my close is simply not, "Can we have a chat?" or "Can we jump on a call?" or "Here's my Calendly, book a session." It's, "Would you like some more information?" And that close is so easy for people to respond to and say, "Yeah, okay," because all you've done is you've given them a benefit. Here's a reason why I think this job might be better than the one you're doing. What have they got to lose by saying yes? So I just think statistically, mathematically, you're more likely to get people to enter into the room, because that's what you're basically looking for people to do. And yeah, so messaging is incredibly powerful, but I still see it being used like a bludgeon.
I wanted to, because there's a few other kind of broad topics I want to make sure we hit on here, because I don't know how much time everyone has, and we've been, I want to make sure we go at least a half hour, but we were going to talk about differences between branding small versus large, potentially, and also the differerences between employer brand versus like product brand or external, kind of brand and whatnot, and should those be different? Either you guys have a preference or any hot takes on either of those?
I do, actually. I do. I feel like I'm doing all the talking. Sorry. I don't see any reason why a company would not run a well thought out advertising campaign selling jobs in the same way that they do when they're launching a new product. Mm-hmm. I don't see any difference in the process. And I've been through processes where you take the raw data, you do the research, you gather the insight, you test it, you then start, trying to look for ways, this is the creative part, and say, how can we express that in a different way that's going to grab attention, make people laugh, think, make them angry, whatever, get an emotion, and so on. It's just build ad campaigns and build, one every couple of years, a big one, and get noticed. Because going back to Nate's point about when people tentatively, look at what inventory is out there, sometimes the first companies they'll go to are those that they saw adverts for that made them laugh or think or connected with them in some way on some level because they were different. And I told you about that ad I saw from that equipment company in Australia. I mean, they're tiny, but I'll always remember them having read that just one ad. I just read one job ad from them, and I will never forget them. And that's the power of advertising. And that's why I tend to prefer to use the word advertising rather than branding, because branding suddenly gives people permission to start getting into soft focus photography and generic headlines. And it ends up with them using lots of we language. They end up talking about themselves. And that's the big problem with employer marketing in general, is this massive overuse of the word we rather than use of the word you. For me, anyway.
I think one of the challenges is companies are notoriously bad at not understanding the damage they do to their bottom line by not having positions filled quicker a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, from an advertising standpoint, everyone understands, okay, you spend X, you get Y. Did we make money on this campaign? But I think any recruiter can understand, like, anytime you've worked on a job that stayed open for a long time, there's certain positions where companies undoubtedly they're losing money by not having certain, whether it's salespeople or whether it's people doing delivery, no matter what function it is, it has like a negative, but they don't view the opportunity cost of not having that job filled as a justification for ad spend the same way they would like simply making more money off a sales standpoint. So I'm not saying that's right. I think that's part of it, is like the way they kind of decisions get made in terms of spending money on ads or anything else. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I keep wanting to trace it back to why. Why are they so flagrant about this? Why do they seem not to, to cover it well enough and pay enough attention to it and spend more time on the types of recruiters they hire and have more in their budget for marketing and advertising? Honestly, I keep coming back to, they don't think they need to, most of them. They just think, well, we're who we are, we're great. And us being great and thinking we're great and growing is going to be enough to get people excited to want to come and work for us. Mm. And
well, it kind of, I think this is also where the conversation is headed too, Mitch. I know this is an area you want to take down, is that a lot of this is being run by HR, and HR is not. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like what level, if you're talking about advertising or marketing for hiring people, like that has to be run by people who have a background in advertising and marketing, not HR people. HR is a completely different function. And I'm not my HR friends out there. I'm not doubting your abilities as professionals, but there's a vast difference between, you know, what your objectives are, what a marketer's knowledge base is, and what an HR person's knowledge base is as it relates to communications.
HR shouldn't be allowed anywhere near the construction of any form of marketing. They just shouldn't. In fact, look, I'll go the whole hog. I don't think HR should be involved in recruiting. I really don't. I think recruiting should be given to sales and or marketing, the marketing, sales and marketing function in that company. There's probably some political problems with that, but honestly, I think there'd be an instant uptick in performance. And you just use HR at the back end, you know?
I mean, I agree 100%. I think the team, I think that also this kind of leads into discussion where we want to potentially have about like your employer brand versus your actual company's brand. Like, I don't think there should be any different. You know, I think these things should totally dovetail. I don't think having a separate employer brand staff versus your other marketing staff makes any sense either. I think that employees and people, like, they're motivated by however they're comped. You know, and if it falls under your responsibilities that you get a bonus kicker for helping your hiring pipeline the same way you would for helping your sales pipeline, I mean, it's just another aspect of doing the job. Yeah. Moreover, I really think too that if you look at companies that have a very strong brand that stand for something, like I'm trying to think of ones off the top of my head, like, you know, Patagonia, you know what I mean? Like they have a certain kind of, everyone knows what they stand for. I mean, that clearly helps them hire the type of people who are excited about what they do. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's lots of companies that have maybe a certain political or social stance, but even short of that, maybe it's just the way they do business or the way they communicate or whatever, that I don't think there should be any difference. So therefore it only makes sense to me why the same team running marketing should be involved in these types of like kind of communications and sales decisions when it comes to your external messaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I you know, I kind of wrote about this in a post yesterday, but Mitch kind of
post, by the way, Nate, I thought that was brilliant, that piece of writing you did yesterday.
Oh, well, thank you. I there's this thing where like I'll have people reach out to me and I, you know, since I've been posting about employer branding for like 2 years, I'll get people reaching out to me saying like, oh, how do I learn more about employer branding? Who should I follow? Stuff like that. My answer has always been the same. I say, like, don't follow anybody in employer branding and do not read anything that has to do with employer branding and only follow really smart marketers, because employer brand people have a tendency to just like stand around and like pat each other on the back and like talk about all the cool things that they are doing at their own companies. And like, I went to one employer branding conference. I'll never go to another one again, because like everything you hear from stage is just like the same, like, it's like the same stuff. And you're sitting there going like, how does this stuff even work? And it's usually from like people at like really big companies that are hiring like massive amounts of like mid to like entry level positions and stuff. We're not talking about people hiring engineers. I'm like, so Mitch, going back to like, there's like, you're kind of like with the HR and recruiting, you're talking about this disconnect, and James, like you're talking about like the brand disconnect, and like, it's all like being perpetuated by this industry that is just like recycling the same like old information, and nobody's thinking about like how to like actually innovate this.
Do you mean that they're saying things like, this is how Microsoft recruit, or this is how Apple do things? Yeah. It's completely erroneous to most mid-sized companies.
Yeah, totally. And like, you know, this is one thing like I wanted to mention, and James, like you kind of talked about company size, but I mean, I think early stage and just small companies have a massive advantage, because they can do things that like once your company gets to a certain size, then suddenly these roles that we're talking about, like things start to get more segmented out. And then you might bring in an actual like somebody to lead employer brand, then that person might have it. And hey, there's some great people out there doing great work. I'm not talking about the entire industry, but I'm talking about a lot of it. But then like once it gets to that point, the secret sauce that like James, you and I like hammer over and over again, it tends to get lost. This ability to have like a founder with like a voice and an opinion about their industry, which is part of the brand, where you have like product marketing, Mitch, that like, you know, where you take a product marketing approach to like talent marketing, which is like what you were talking about with running campaigns, and like just sharing things about your company that is just like overall like brand recognition in the market. That stuff like suddenly starts getting lost, and like this switch flips, and it's like, oh, we need to start doing things like the way that all these other companies are doing it.
Look, I remember, you know, I remember loads and loads of companies. It's different because we're in different countries, but the two that always stand out in my head whose ads I always remembered were Guinness and Yellow Pages. Their ads were always entertaining, funny, thought-provoking, and so you remembered them. Yeah. The Dollar Shave Club guy. Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
I know.
What's to stop lots and lots of small companies just going out on a limb and just, you know, and the guy was still talking about the value proposition of his product. He was just doing it in an interesting and entertaining way. And that's how you get remembered. It's not rocket science.
I think that, and this is, Nate, the point that we made probably a million times, is that ultimately it's real. People want to work with smart people. People want to work with people with the same values. People want to work with people with a vision that they like. And I'm talking about leaderships. See, people work with leaders with all these types of things. And I think that is what we've done enough research. We've done enough survey research on every skill set. Every single person, we like, they want to know who the manager is, who the CEO is, what their thoughts are. That's what candidates ultimately care about. And I think that getting some and also to Mitch's point, to creativity is like where companies should stop following what other people do and start doing their own damn thing. Is just think about how you can get the leader in your organization out in front of people in a more creative way that's going to stand out, doing something that's different than everyone else is doing. And I don't have an answer for how you do that. That's just something you have to kind of figure out on your own.
Hire an ad agency. You hire a good ad agency, not an EB agency, or not one that specializes in recruitment. You just hire an ad agency that knows how to sell, how to move products off shelf, and because it's the same dynamic, exactly the same, just dealing with different material.
Because the thing is, I do want to say that too, is because I've seen plenty of bad professionally shot employer brand. Like you'll see the videos on LinkedIn, and it's just so cheesy and canned, and they wanted to look good and slick, but they end up just staying inside the lines. It just kind of fed in. But I think that the script is really simple though. It's just like, find out who the leader is that you want to feature. What is it about them? And find someone creative that can kind of pull those aspects out and make it like, you don't have, I think most places, they try too hard to be something or present themselves in a certain way or present their company culture and all this other like garbage, as opposed to just like featuring the leaders and giving them a bit of a platform.
Let me give you a little quick anecdotal story I was in Geneva. I was running a business out there. I had a client, needed to recruit for what was then quite a high-powered tech job, paying quite a lot of money. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but anyway, HR said, this is the guy we use for advertised search. And he sent me an ad, and this guy had written an ad, which told me two things. One, he couldn't write ads because it was awful, and he just borrowed from what he typically saw elsewhere. But the fact that he went to the bother told me that the guy was invested. So anyway, I went to meet him, we talked, we sat down, I had to ask a lot of questions. It was a job I didn't fully understand, at least not at first. But anyway, the long and the short of it was, I said to him, look, tomorrow morning, I want you to send me an email, and I want you to send me 4 or 5 paragraphs, 300 words, 250 words, somewhere around that. And I want you to send me what you would say to somebody that you met in a bar tonight, and you had a glass of wine with them, and it turned out that they happened to be a potentially ideal candidate for that job. And they said to you, so why do you think I might be interested? Whatever you think you would say to them, write that down and send it to me. And he did. And it needed organizing and tidying up here and there, but it was brilliant because it was real. and he got to what was really important to the other person, not to him. And off the back of it, we produced a great ad, and it worked. We found, in fact, the guy who got the job wrote me a testimonial that's still on my LinkedIn profile now. It's just that. It doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
There's only one. Do we want to talk about recruitment agencies, or do we care?
Well, you know,
I on the checklist.
I found out through a comment on my post yesterday. I didn't even know this, but now it makes a lot of sense that there's this like rift going on now between like talent acquisition and employer brand. Some guy commented that like my post was like kind of showing the how like, you know, talent acquisition wants one thing, but employer brand knows that there's like all this other things that we need to consider. And I'm just kind of seeing like how obviously what camp I fall into and like why that exists.
Do you think recruitment agencies have an employer brand or a brand of any description, Nate?
Yeah.
Or
agencies, I can't mention Hirewell enough whenever I give like people examples of just employer brands in general and like companies who are doing like great things, especially getting employees involved. And like, I mean, shit, what James has done over like at Hirewell, it's like you can't not pop into LinkedIn and see something from Hirewell. It's like incredible.
Well, that's true of me and you because, you know, we brought in, I have, because James is one of my favorite content producers. So I brought in, whether he's successful or not, I will always believe he's a good content producer.
Thanks, buddy.
But yeah, I think so.
I mean, the answer, I mean, everybody has an employer brand. It might suck, you know, and I think that's, I think that the challenge, our industry is just so far behind the times with anything digital. And like, I guess the quick story, which I've probably mentioned this maybe once or twice before, the reason why we got into doing what we do from like a digital and branding perspective is because I launched our digital recruiting practice about 2 to 3 years prior. And after literally talking to marketers every day, all day, in all these industries that were just starting to embrace digital for the first time, like real estate, you know, like before 2015, there weren't real estate firms doing it in digital, right? But all of a sudden, like everyone's doing it. And then I realized like, wait, why aren't we doing this? And it was because like there was no template out there. Like there was no recruiting firm I could find in the whole world at that point in 2016, 2017, whatever year that was doing anything. So it works for us because I'm one of the partners and I can jump in with both feet. And I just believed it would work, you know, but I would have, and we talk a small versus large, right? So we're a smaller company that, you know, has the kind of leeway, and I have the ability to kind of just do and riff and kind of experiment with kind of whatever we want. But I can see why a lot of like you mentioned, like Randstad or any of the large firms, I can see why this takes them forever to get off, because that's got to be a decision by committee, and they're just so entrenched in the way they do things that, you know.
Do you think also as any company gets bigger, it starts to veer towards playing in defense mode? So when you're small, you've got more of an attack mindset. Let's get noticed. Let's do something different. Let's stand out because we need to grow. And then as you do grow and you become richer and fatter, you get more defensive. Yeah.
I think it's like I can't think of any good examples of companies that, I hate reusing, but like Elon Musk, he's probably, because he's the CEO, he can say whatever really damn well, or Richard Branson, you know what I mean? Like
the brand is him, isn't it? It's him as a person.
Essentially, yeah.
Which is rare for a company that big. Yeah.
I can see it's just people, it's more fun to take chances when you're small because you're not risking very much, as you said. Yeah. And if there's just companies have a big lack of there's a lot of fear in saying the wrong thing, especially in this day and age, or being perceived the wrong way, or maybe they're being perceived as not serious, or maybe the people in charge have reached a level of success in the company they just don't care anymore, and they're not the person who'd be taking these kind of chances and getting involved in these initiatives, and people below them wouldn't feel comfortable. So
okay, I have one last question. well, for me anyway, for Nate probably. Nate, do you see the illogicality in the fact that, and I think you're going to agree with the premise that I'm just going to put in front of you now, is that the very companies who need employer branding the most are those that are too small to afford it. The companies that are big enough to not need it are the ones that tend to spend money on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. But this is like where, like, I really, I can't, and I appreciate the question because it's confirming in me that I need to like keep hammering this message that small companies actually have a big advantage because they can do things the right way, which is very different than their larger, let's say, competitors or like those category leaders are doing it. Like they really can have like a personality as a company and as a brand, and they can take chances and they don't have to take forever and they can experiment. And I think like, you know, this is something that like, I know James, I'm sure you've had in internal conversations I have like with my team and stuff, is like, it's like, don't wait, like just go, just like do stuff. Like we have an idea, like let's put it out, you know. It's like that kind of like cadence and like comfort with taking risk, because the outcomes are too great and the downside is just so small that small companies can really compete at a different level. So the answer is yes, but I just see a huge competitive advantage if you're a small company.
I think small companies can have that done is better than perfect mindset more easily, which is what I think what it takes to be successful is you just have to keep doing stuff.
So the challenge is just to get them to persuade them to spend the money. Yeah, because they often won't budget for that kind of thing, will they?
I don't think they need budget. They can do this. They can. It will cost money because it will take some time, but they can do it internally. They can just do this themselves.
Okay.
I'm gonna hold up my budget number.
I'm slowly edging towards the door in the room here, Nate. Come on, stop me leaving. What? How?
Yeah. So employer branding budget is going to be taken up by somebody's, let's just say first somebody's salary, and then it's going to be taken. It's going to be like probably outsourcing to an agency to do some kind of like strategic work, and then some kind of like content and some kind of tools and whatever. It's going to go to like all of those things. But if you're a small company, the ability to create the actual, like the most relevant, relatable content, almost everything's free. It just is going to take time to put it together and put it out, which is like what James and I do. We don't like, it doesn't cost us any money.
No, sure, absolutely. No. And it's what I've done as well. But you're right, we're small businesses, we have time on our side, we can try things, but we also probably came to it with some natural ability, which not everyone is going to have in terms of communication and ideas and ways of positioning things and the use of metaphors and all of those things. Yeah.
But this is going, but then again, this is why we have to, like, especially for small companies, don't think of this as employer brand as a separate thing. Just think about it like just talking about the things that you care about, how you do things, what you stand for as a company, opinions, just like get that stuff out, because that is like going to attract buyers, investors, people who align with that. And at the same time, it's going to attract talent too.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
All right. Yeah, it's a start for sure. It's a start. Yeah.
I'm going to argue too. I would argue that it's not just a start. It is a much, much better foundation and mindset to just like have in place as you start scaling up as a company.
Yeah, look, the only issue I have with that is there's a lot of them talking about themselves. And I just think that's at the root of a lot of problems with employer marketing, recruitment marketing in general. It doesn't speak to the needs and desires of the potential candidate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen sentences in subheadings on job ads where it says, "What's in it for you?" And the first line is, "You get to be part of helping us double our turnover." I swear to God, I read that.
I've seen those. Yeah. Talk about how much are we like using how much money you raised in your funding as a selling point.
Thank you. Anyway.
I'm glad you raised 300 million. How much of that do I get? You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you know what? At the same time, maybe I'm just like, maybe I live in a fantasy world. I don't know, but it's something I believe. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all do believe in the core thing. We just have perhaps slightly different interpretations on some of it. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys. I got some other calls to get on today, so
yeah,
go back to selling.
All right.
So it's been a long run, I hope, but it's all good. I love talking to you too anytime I can. So
yeah.
Everyone out there, enjoy the rest of your day. That's a wrap for the Employer Content Show. If you want to hear more of what Nate, Mitch, and I have to say, you can view all of our episodes on HireWell Talent Insights, talentinsights.hirewell.com, or you can also subscribe to the HireWell channel on YouTube and the Talent Insights podcast on Apple, Google, Amazon, and Spotify. I really fumbled through it that time. Mitch, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
See you soon. Everyone out there.
All right.
Peace.
Have a good afternoon, guys. Take care.
See ya.